We're proud to support the craft of journalism. UBS brings you the latest news from around the world with The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Be part of an international network that brings together leading insights, research and technology across 24 time zones and 12 key financial hubs, with you at the center of it all. UBS. Advice is our craft.
You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 15th of July 2023 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Live from London, this is The Globalist with me, Emma Nelson. A very warm welcome to today's programme. Coming up,
we are going to be sending them weapons and they're going to be paying for them.
President Trump sets a new deadline for Moscow to reach a peace deal in Ukraine and pledges to send more weapons to Kyiv. But will this make any difference to Russia's war? Also ahead in the next 60 minutes, why Norwegians are falling for Chinese electric vehicles, plus
Brazil is a mirror to the rest of the world because these phenomena are spreading like a pandemic and they're very similar.
We hear from the Oscar-winning director of a new documentary, Apocalypse in the Tropics. We'll have the latest news from the drinks world and find out why UNESCO has chosen a North Korean mountain as a World Heritage Site. Plus the newspapers too. That's all ahead on The Globalist, live from London. First, a quick look at what else is happening in today's news. Iran has said it won't take part in further nuclear talks with the US unless Washington stops insisting that Tehran abandons its uranium enrichment. This week's meeting of G20 finance ministers in South Africa will go ahead without the US Treasury Secretary. And India's aviation regulator has instructed the country's airlines to inspect its fuel control switches in all of its Boeing aircraft. Stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on these stories. But first, Donald Trump says new weapons are heading to Ukraine and fresh sanctions could be imposed on Russia in what appears to be a major shift in his approach to the war in Ukraine. The president has threatened Russia with tariffs of at least 100% if it doesn't reach a ceasefire with Kyiv within 50 days. Well, to tell us more from the Ukrainian perspective, I'm joined now from Kyiv by Oleksiy Goncharenko, who's a Ukrainian member of parliament. Very good morning to you, Oleksiy. Thank you for your time with us. Just explain to us what we know about what is being sent to Ukraine by the US to help you.
First of all, political message has been sent. And I'm not now trying to, in any way, to diminish what was said. Quite opposite. It was really a very important signal that President Trump changed his attitude towards the war of Russia against our country. And this is the most important. What exactly we will receive and when, I really don't know. It was said about air defense. Also, we need ammunition. So we need short and medium range missiles. So what we will receive, we will know soon. But the statement of President Trump that he gives 50 days for Putin to go for real negotiations means that finally Trump starts to speak with Putin the only language Putin understands, the language of force.
Do we believe Donald Trump's major shift in tone, or are you still worried that a very erratic US president could have 50 days to change his mind?
What is predictable about Donald Trump, that he is quite unpredictable. So I don't know exactly what he will do in the next 50 days. But I think he values his word, and I think it will be hard for him after such a concrete statement and some absolutely clear term, just to forget about this. Also, I think that many people, including media, politicians, and so on, they will, and other international leaders will not let them just disappear. So I think this is a major shift. I think Donald Trump will not back it up, but we will see.
This shift in tone is clearly calming nerves in Kyiv. You sound reassured, for starters. But what Donald Trump is offering is nowhere near the level that was given to you in terms of support from the Biden administration, is it?
Again, it's hard to say. We don't know exactly what we will receive in these next 50 days, what weapons we will receive. And there is no sense to compare it anymore with President Biden, because President Biden is not president anymore. So we should compare it with what was said and what was done several months ago. And there was moments when the deliveries to Ukraine were stopped, deliveries of weaponry. Trump spoke with Putin and praised him with very nice words. So yesterday when he said that all this nice talking from Putin is nothing as it appeared, I think he said absolutely frankly. I think he believed that Putin also wants peace and it can be easily achieved. But now when he understands the situation, he knows what to do.
What evidence do we have that Putin wants peace? Because we've seen Russia's economy surviving 3 years of sanctions. We've seen Donald Trump yesterday talking about how he would come off a telephone call with Vladimir Putin, referring to him by his first name, and then going back to the White House apartments and his wife Melania, the First Lady, saying that Putin's gone and bombed some more people and has attacked another place. There is a sense, perhaps from the outside world, that Russia is not interested in stopping this war.
We have all evidences that Putin doesn't want peace. You're absolutely right. And it's clear. But we also have evidences that Russia is not so strong, how Putin tries to show himself. Just watch. First, Putin was Putin had a lot of hopes on this summer offensive, which is happening right now in Ukraine. But now it's the middle of summer. Where are big results of Putin? What is his breakthrough? He didn't take even one Ukrainian town. Yeah, he destroyed several villages and took them, but that's it. So if United States will help Ukraine more with weapons, it will make his incremental gains even more humble. And at the same time, 100% tariffs against countries which are buying Russian oil, it can really finish Russian economy. Because the only source of Putin's war chest is oil. That's it.
Well, you say that this could ruin the economy, but yesterday Russia's stock market rose by nearly 3%. This was not what the desired effect was by Donald Trump. There was a sense, perhaps, or questions were being asked as to whether Russia was actually bracing itself for an even tougher response from the United States, and was relieved by what Donald Trump said.
You're meaning that Russia stock exchange showed some increase? Do you mean this?
Yes.
So I think it's quite opposite, because always when there is a perspective of end of war, Russian stock market shows positive signals. So it means that Russian stock market decided that in 50 days we have a real chance for peace. That's why it started to grow, because that is the biggest problem for Russia is this war, and for Russian economy too. So I think it's quite opposite. It shows that Trump's statement yesterday was really effective, and many people, including in Russia itself, including in economical and political elites, they believe that Trump can push Putin to peace.
What would peace look like, given the fact that we haven't actually seen what Donald Trump wants from any peace deal, despite the fact that, let's be absolutely clear about this, and you know it better than anybody else, this is not America's war. But the fact remains is that we don't know what peace could look like yet.
First of all, it is American war, because this is the war for international law. This is the war about, is the West reliable partner? Is the United States country you can rely on? Does the United States keep its promises? I'm speaking about guarantees which Ukraine received from the United States and United Kingdom when we voluntarily gave up our nuclear weapons arsenal, the third largest in the world at that time. So I think this is American war for sure. And if this war would be lost, that consequences will be huge, not just for Ukraine, but far, far beyond. So that's what I think. President Trump looks like also, as I told you, changed his attitude. And it's very clear that there is a lot of pressure inside the United States. Look at this bill on the secondary sanctions against Russia, up to 500%, by Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal. 82 senators signed it, 82 from 100. Show me another case in the United States today which can unite 82% of US Senate, highly divided. I think it's nothing, almost nothing. So there is a lot of pressure also inside the country, and we shouldn't forget about it.
Alexei Goncharenko, Ukrainian member of parliament, they're talking to us on the line from Kyiv. A very warm thanks to you for that. You're listening to The Globalist. It's 13:10 in Phnom Penh and 7:10 a.m. here in London. Now, young Cambodians aged 18 and over have been told that from next year military service is compulsory. The announcement comes as tensions persist on the border with neighbouring Thailand. Well, I'm joined now by James Chambers, Monocle's Asia editor, who's on the road in northern Thailand, currently pulling together Monocle's Thailand handbook. Good afternoon, James. We'll come to the book in a minute, but let's just check in with this this plan. A very good afternoon to you, by the way.
Good morning, Emma. Yes.
Okay, we're going to persist. Whereabouts are you exactly? What can you see?
Well, how familiar are you with northern Thailand? I'm in a city called Lumpang, which is about an hour and a half outside of Chiang Mai. So it's Chiang Mai is quite small, so this is even smaller. It's quite residential and very rural.
And what takes you there?
As you said, it's the handbook. As our editor Andrew Tuck announced on the weekend, we are starting to produce this country book on Thailand. It's the first Asian country that we're going to be doing in our series. And so I'm starting to report now, and then colleagues from London are flying over in the next few weeks.
So off we go. Thank you for that, and I'm sure we'll come. You'll keep us updated with your progress. Let's go back to one of the reasons why we're talking to you today, which is the announcement about Cambodia introducing military service or compulsory military service for its young people. This is a direct response, isn't it? Is this a direct response to issues with Thailand?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the Cambodians have had this law about conscription since 2006. So it's just been sitting there for almost 20 years, not being enforced. But yesterday, the newish Prime Minister, Hun Manet, put on his khaki uniform and made a speech declaring that from next year it's now going to be in force. And he made a direct link with troubles on the border with Thailand and how this is a kind of a reminder from Cambodia that they've got to get their army shipshape just in case something were to happen. And so he said he's going to enforce it from next year, and they're going to slightly change it so that it's not just 18 months as was envisaged in the initial legislation, but it's actually going to be extended to 24 months, which is the kind of the standard for most countries that do military conscription. So yes, it is a direct response to what's going on, but it's not abnormal. I mean, Thailand does it. Cambodia would be the sixth member of ASEAN to do it, and of course countries from all over the world do it. So it is a development that we didn't want to see because it could be seen as an escalation, but it's not in any way abnormal in this part of the world. Indeed,
not abnormal, but as you say, that does mark a change. And is there any sense from the Thai point of view, and then we'll look at Cambodia as well, that there is an expectation of an escalation, of being prepared, of preparedness for conflict?
I mean, from the Thai side, it's all about de-escalation. And the senior military members in charge of this are saying all the right things about how they want to de-escalate, and it seems to be all of the brouhaha coming from the Cambodian side. And if you look at how it's been covered in the newspapers in Cambodia versus Thailand, I mean it is top story, second story, third story, fourth story in Cambodia. Whereas in Thailand, it feels like the government here and the country has much bigger fish to fry, and people are more concerned here about the tariffs discussion with the US. So we don't quite yet understand why the Cambodians and Hun Manet and his father Hun Sen, who's essentially the de facto leader who started all this, why they want to raise tensions in this way. But it's a tactic that both sides have used over the years. The border tensions have existed for decades, and if you look at both sides, there's good reason for distracting the people and getting them kind of drummed up and focused on this nationalism rather than focus on the economy, because both countries are struggling a lot right now.
And if you're looking at the local papers in Cambodia, you said it's making the headlines. This is clearly something that is going to be very relevant to lots and lots of people.
Well, of course, yes. If you're 16, 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old male in Cambodia, you're going to be feeling a little bit nervous right now. This does apply to women as well, but it's voluntary for females. Males is compulsory. So you can imagine, especially if you're from a grassroots or working class background, because you can imagine the offspring of the wealthy elite surrounding Hun Sen. They're either overseas or will soon be overseas to avoid this, or will be able to buy their way out. So yes, for a lot of young people, they will be feeling very, very nervous about this, and a lot of them will probably end up in places like Thailand trying to escape from it. So, I mean, that's from the Cambodian side. From the Thai side, the focus is not very much on the military. I mean, if you look at the two countries, it's not quite David and Goliath, but it's a bit like, I mean, I've compared it in size before to like the UK and the Netherlands. I mean, Thailand's about 70 million people, Cambodia's under 10 million, or 15 million. So they're very much little and large. The Thai military is a lot more professionalized, it's a lot larger, it trains the Americans all the time. So I guess from the Thai side, they don't feel the same level of threat. And actually what the Thais have been focusing on is using this tension between the two countries to actually go after a lot of the scam businesses that have been operated on the Cambodian border by a lot of kind of Chinese gangs. So the Thais are very much going after them and cracking down on a lot of the people in Hun Sen's circle who operate these or benefit from these mobile phone scam rings. So that's infuriating Hun Sen even more. So this might not develop militarily, but tensions and relations between the two countries don't look like they're going to get any better anytime soon.
It's quite interesting that if you look at the Khmer Times this morning, coming out of Cambodia, there are letters from political scientists effectively saying, can we just calm this down, please, because this is never going to be the answer. I mean, it seemed to be sort of one voice in an escalation of political, ratcheting up of pressure. Is there a sense that either Cambodia or Thailand actually want to make relations deteriorate even further?
I mean, it's hard pressed to find somebody who does want to do that other than Hun Sen's family. I mean, they've been in charge of Cambodia for decades. I mean, it's a single-party state. They have kind of sham elections, but there's no real opposition. So, when you kind of try and speculate about what's happening here, it's the usual case. Well, he for some reason finds that his grip on power is perhaps loosening. I mean, he handed over the reins to his son a couple of years ago, so he has stepped back, and obviously his son has not had the same upbringing as the father. And so there might be an element of insecurity in Cambodia, especially when you feed in all of these crime gangs that have now suddenly been cracked down upon, and so the money that this family relies on to hold on to power is perhaps under threat. But you are getting countries like China, like France, which has a history in Cambodia of trying to mediate and trying to get the two sides together. But it does seem at the moment that the two are at loggerheads. I saw that Hun Manet is making some offers to Thailand to say that if Thailand opens the borders, if Thailand restores everything back to normal, then that within hours the Cambodians will do the same. But there's no way the Thais will do that and risk losing face. So at the moment, something needs to change. And from the Thai side, I mean, that might happen when Thailand gets a new prime minister. The current one, Paetongtarn Shinawatra, who's intimately involved in all this, she's been suspended. She's probably going to be kicked out. So Thailand will, in a few months, probably get a new leader. But I don't see how anybody can actually negotiate with the Cambodians now because of how they behaved. So it might be one of those things that just goes on for months and months, and we'll be talking about this for for a few more weeks to come.
Well, we won't distract you anymore from your work, just heading into the north of Thailand. James Chambers, Monocle's Asia editor, somewhere in northern Thailand, writing a handbook for us. Thank you so much for joining us on The Globalist. Still to come on today's programme. Guess what? We've got the latest news from the drinks world. Stay with us.
Craft is its own reward, which is why at UBS we're honoured to work alongside over 50 of today's leading Nobel laureates, each an expert in the art of economic science, bringing you engaging discussions, actionable insights, and inspired solutions, all focused around the questions that shape our world today. For a better outlook, find a Nobel perspective. UBS. Banking is our craft.
7:21 here in London. Nina Dos Santos, international broadcast correspondent and the former CNN Europe editor, has just come in dressed sharp as a pin for a lovely bright morning here in London. Good morning, Nina.
Thank you. I do try and make an effort for you, Emma,
So, OK, here's a little secret. Some of us make an effort, some of us don't. Nina makes an effort. She even curls her hair.
Actually, I think there was a hairband. But thanks for the compliment. Unfortunately, it doesn't translate on radio.
Well, it's sort of
but I am making an effort for you.
It's that kind of, you could come in your pyjamas and your flip-flops and you're going to sound like you're in your pyjamas and your flip-flops. But this woman, ladies and gentlemen, is as bright as a button. Thank you for coming in. What have you spotted in the papers?
Well, let's start out with things on the other side of the channel with regards to the EU, because obviously it's been quite a turbulent time for them over the last few days, not counting Donald Trump's missives on social media when he decided that on the 1st of August he was going to slap one of the world's biggest trading relationships with 30% tariffs. And after that, we've had quite a bit of scrambling in Brussels. But it's not just the trade tariffs that are keeping them occupied. It's the fact that they've got a big, whopping, great EU budget to pass for the years of 2028 to 2034. And in typical Brussels fashion, you don't call a budget there. You call it a multi-annual financial framework, an MFF, to give it its proper acronym.
EU language is wonderful. It's just a wonderful...
It's a lot of Belgian waffle, put it that way.
It's always a lot of words and doesn't necessarily give an indication of what lies behind words.
No, that's right.
What lies behind this?
But in this case, a lot of money lies behind it, because the EU's current budget is worth about 1.2 trillion euros. That might sound like a lot, but actually critics have been saying for a very long time that it actually only represents about 1% of the EU's total GDP if you put those 27 countries together, and that it should be at least probably double that to try and increase the EU's languishing competitivity issues and to compete with its main trading partners like, for instance, the United States and also China. Now, Mario Draghi, the former head of the European Central Bank, you'll remember him from the days of the Eurozone bailouts and years of quantitative easing, somebody who's viewed as a very capable ex-Goldman Sachs banker, former Italian Prime Minister, technocrat. He was in charge with last year taking a look at how to boost competitivity by Ursula von der Leyen, the two-time EU Commission President, and he recommended that they put an awful lot more financial firepower behind the EU's collective budget to try and beef up things like joint infrastructure projects, electricity grids and networks, and also, of course, to put more money behind the thorny issue of defence.
This makes total sense. Europe needs to be more competitive. It is being argued everywhere that Europe is no longer as competitive as it was. But one of the big questions that's being asked in this Politico article is the most important one. How do they pay for all this?
Well, and who will pay for it? That's the other issue. So let's take a look at, as I was saying before, sort of 1.2 trillion euros sounds like a lot. It's only about 1% of the EU's budget, as I was saying, or EU's GDP, as I was saying. You take a look at countries like Germany, and its budget on a domestic level is worth about 48% of its GDP. Take France with its legendary spending on the state that makes up 57% of GDP, and you can see that this amount that they allocate to the EU is actually just a paltry sum in comparison to what they would do at a national level. The issue that Ursula von der Leyen has is that she has to convince all 27 member states to agree to higher spending, and some of them already don't get out what they put in. Countries like Germany and the Netherlands are notoriously, concerned about spending more because they can't sell it to their electorates because already they don't get as much out of the EU pot as they put in. Some Eastern European countries that have benefited and Southern European countries that have benefited over generations from lavish EU spending, it's easier for them to market that to their electorate because it's very obvious how their standard of living has been improved by the EU. Now, the fact that von der Leyen has put aside 2 years to negotiate this with member states gives you an idea of how fraught this battle is likely to be, especially considering, as just the other day, she had to face a no confidence vote that she got through.
She just about got through that as well. I mean, the sort of European parliamentarians who are rushing back to sort of stand up for her. Now, that is actually an important problem internationally, isn't it? How that is viewed by those who are either working from within the EU, member states, but also from the outside. If you were Donald Trump and you were looking at Ursula von der Leyen and you were just about to impose 30% taxes and you knew that she was weak, that really puts the EU on the back foot, doesn't it?
And you also know that she's German. And we know that he has an issue with Germany, in particular, not just because it is the biggest economy inside the EU, but also because he views Germany and German politicians as having an outsized say in economically what the EU does, and their German industry is having a big role in that enormous trade deficit. Trade deficit that he calls enormous. It has widened by about 12% over the last couple of years or so, and that's one of America's beefs. It says that the EU gets much, much more out of the trading relationship, and in particular Germany does. And you've got to remember that von der Leyen is German, former German Defence Secretary, but we've also got senior other figures who are far more prominent on the EU landscape now, like Friedrich Merz, the new Chancellor of Germany, who also is from the same political persuasion, the CDU, centre-right, as von der Leyen. And also we've got a big voice in the European Parliament as well in the form of Martin Weber from the same party.
Let's have a look at another story that's doing the rounds. It's in the Times. Now, regular listeners will know that Simon Brooke, who often sits in this chair, is always tasked with finding a story that pokes fun at France, and it's in the Times. Nina, you've done Simon's job for him, and in fact you found a marvellous story, a bit of French bashing in the Times newspaper.
Oh, I love Simon Brooke. And actually,
and we love France and we love swimming pools.
Indeed, we do.
This is a problem in the paper.
Yeah, that's right. France, which I didn't realise, actually, even though I was just there the other day at a friend of mine's place in the south of France that mercifully has a swimming pool for now. I didn't realise that it was the third highest country in the world in terms of per capita swimming pool numbers, only eclipsed by Brazil, which isn't surprising, and also the United States. It's got about 3.6 million pools. That's 5 times more nowadays than it had pre-2019, pre-COVID days. So you can see that a lot more French people have been building a lot more swimming pools recently to cope with climate change and the fact that the country is getting hotter and hotter. But lots of French councils in France have said enough is enough. The water table has fallen, even in rainy parts of France like Brittany. That also surprised me, where you've had various councils from Brittany to Provence, less surprising perhaps, considering it is a very dry area of France that's prone to wildfires, and the Pyrenees. They have been trying to ban the building of new swimming pools, saying that, there's no point in wasting water selfishly on one house having its own enormous stash of water in its backyard just to use for leisure activities. Now, obviously, the counter-argument is that actually swimming pools in France provide necessary sources of fitness, an opportunity for people to cool down, learn how to swim, and they only take up around about 0.08% of the country's total water consumption.
Okay, thank you for that. Finally, quite a distressing story that you found about the fact that actually plants can scream, or plants can tell animals if they are unhappy. I'm not entirely sure if I'm getting this right, Nina.
Well, I remember 20 odd years ago when I studied biology at university, this one came up because if you put sensors in the ground around a plant and then you cut its leaf off, I remember we did experiments that could show that the plant would start emitting signals showing, that it was in some form of distress. This article here in the BBC refers to the interaction between plants and animals that often lay their eggs inside plants, like, for instance, moths. So the BBC has a report looking into some research conducted by scientists at Tel Aviv University that say that they have now, they believe, conclusively been able to sort of prove that moths that normally nest in, say, lay their eggs in tomato plants will avoid certain tomato plants if they emit certain sounds that obviously we can't hear. But remember, moths have very, acute hearing and sensory capacities. If those plants are emitting any kind of signal that they are in ill health or distressed, the obvious assumption here is that a moth will be looking for the healthiest plant to lay its eggs in so that its larvae can, feast on a healthy plant rather than one that might soon die.
Thank you so much for bringing all those stories in. Nina Dos Santos, international broadcast correspondent and former CNN Europe editor. Thank you. You're listening to The Globalist. Now, a quick look at what else we're keeping an eye on today. The former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert has condemned Israeli government plans to move Palestinians living in Gaza. Israel's defence minister announced last week that the territory's 2 million inhabitants would eventually be moved to a so-called humanitarian city to be built in the ruins of Rafah. Iran has said it won't take part in any further nuclear talks with the United States unless Washington stops insisting that Tehran abandons uranium enrichment. Donald Trump has consistently made it a key demand of any deal. This week's meeting of G20 finance ministers in South Africa is to go ahead without the US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. He'd also skipped the previous gathering in February as US tariff threats overshadow the world economy. Questions are now being asked about America's role in the G20 and its more general relevance. And India's aviation regulator has instructed the country's airlines to inspect its fuel control switches in all Boeing aircraft. It follows reports that the switches may have played a part in last month's Air India crash in which 260 people died. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. 7:32 here in London, 9:32 a.m. in Helsinki. Now, any manufacturer of electric vehicle listening now will know full well that there's one market in the world that you really want to be in, and that is the Norwegian car market. At the top when it comes to sales is Tesla, but now Chinese cars are beginning to make an appearance. Well, Petri Burtsoff is Monocle's Helsinki correspondent, and he joins me now. A very good morning to you, Petri.
Good morning, Emma. Good morning from sunny Helsinki.
So, what is it about the Norwegian car market which is so aligned with electric vehicles?
Well, it's a lot of things. It's government incentives. You don't pay tax on electric cars. It's also the infrastructure. You know, anywhere you drive in Norway, pretty much within a 50k radius, you will have charging stations. So just it makes the uptake of electric vehicles so much easier. Because I mean, let's remember that some of the barriers for adopting electric cars are that people are scared of having sort of enough range when you go out on a drive, and then it's the price. So both of those sort of hindrances have been taken care of by the authorities in Norway.
And is it a cultural thing as well? Do people just feel as if they are more easily able to embrace electric vehicles? I mean, you mentioned the fact that, the infrastructure is better, which is a huge barrier, but are people more culturally open now?
Yeah, I think you have a point there. I think it's become sort of a snowball effect. You know, it's become trendy in recent years to drive electric cars, and you know, it's something like, you know, almost 90% of all the new cars being sold in Norway are now electric, and people actually analysts forecast that it's going to be close to 100% soon. And you know, Norwegians are already seeing the effect of this. City air quality in cities like Bergen, Oslo has actually been proven to have improved because of this.
Now, we mentioned Tesla on Monocle on Sunday a couple of days ago about how the Norwegians are probably some of the only people on earth who are finding Tesla attractive. We'll come back to that in a minute. But the focus for this moment is on the Chinese electric car market. Why is it doing so well?
Well, yes, Chinese brands are growing, in particular in Norway. They now account for close to 10% of new car sales. Just a few years ago, it was just 4%. I suppose it has to do with the Norwegian sort of open door policy. So as opposed to the European Union, which, as we know, set tariffs on Chinese car imports, Norway has no tariffs. So it's a free market. You know, people are free to choose sort of whatever they deem is best value for money, and Chinese brands are growing in Norway. But then if you look at sort of the entire EV market in Europe, there you see that Tesla has actually taken a hit, and that's partly, I believe, also because of Mr. Musk and sort of the it's been maybe trendy to have a Tesla a couple of years ago, but maybe not so trendy anymore. But Chinese brands are not growing as fast in the European Union because of the tariffs that the EU has placed on them.
And explain why that what could happen next as a result of this.
Right. So a lot of it has to do with how if the tariffs are kept in place. But I mean, if they are, we've already seen that the overall sort of battery electric vehicles, so those are the fully electric ones, not the plug-in hybrids, their share in the overall EU market has actually dropped from about 14% a couple of years ago to only 12% last year. So the tariffs are having an effect. But then another sort of thing to keep an eye on is the Tesla sales overall in Europe, and whether they will rebound like they have in Norway. We haven't seen effects of that yet, but then again, looking at Norway, you know, Tesla there recorded a 54% year-on-year jump in new car sales just in June. So if something similar is to be expected in the European Union, so we can expect the Tesla shares to go up there as well.
Let's return to the Chinese influx of cars. There's an article in the Financial Times today. Its big read is how BYD, which is the Chinese sort of mid-size, actually all-size electric vehicle manufacturer, has caught up with Tesla in the global electric vehicle race. And it argues that actually Tesla has missed a trick in quite a lot of areas of technology, and that the Chinese have absolutely hit the money when it comes to knowing its market, knowing the product, and getting it to the right place at the right time. There are still big questions, however, being raised about having a major or a majority number of Chinese vehicles electric being run on international roads. How worried are the Norwegians about the idea that all the political and the security ideas that come associated with having a lot of Chinese cars on a road?
Well, I mean, if you look at the numbers, they don't seem very worried, because Chinese brands such as BYD, which you mentioned, are growing. But I suppose it is a concern, of course, that on the EU level, the tariffs have been justified for other reasons, not necessarily for safety and security reasons, but for the reason has been to protect the European car industry. But then, I mean, I find this article really interesting. It also looks at what the BYD has done right, and you're right to point out that their sales have actually grown a lot. It says tenfold here in the articles in just a couple of years, and they've overtaken Tesla in annual revenue. And there's a lot of reasons to it. First of all, BYD manufactures most of its key components in-house. That's batteries, motors, and a lot of the electronics. Tesla doesn't do that. They've developed very innovative new battery technology. And then I think critically what they've done is they've unveiled a ultra-fast charging technology that's capable of adding 400 kilometers of range in just 5 minutes of charging, and they've added that to all of their models, not just sort of the upper range, more expensive models like Teslas have done. So they've just done a lot of things also right, and it's actually Mr. Musk, who is maybe not known for his humility. He has himself actually acknowledged after he toured some of the Chinese factories that they're actually not lagging behind Tesla at all in terms of the tech.
Petri Burtsoff, Monocle's Helsinki correspondent, thank you as ever for joining us. You're listening to The Globalist. And now we head to Brazil. Apocalypse in the Tropics is a new Netflix documentary that's out now, directed by the Oscar-nominated Petra Costa. It looks at the powerful evangelical movement in Brazil and how it paved the way to Jair Bolsonaro's victory. It's an interesting look at the increasing involvement of evangelical leaders in the country's political decisions. Monocle Radio's senior correspondent Fernando Augusto Pacheco caught up with Petra here in our studio in London.
This city was designed as a vision of Brazil's future. And the cement that held it together was a faith, not in God, but instead in the equally abstract ideas of progress and democracy.
Petra Costa, welcome back to Monocle Radio, this time to talk about another amazing documentary, Apocalypse in the Tropics. And what a fantastic theme as well, right? Because we just heard on the news the religion makeup in Brazil, the rise of the number of evangelicals. So when did you decide to do this film? Because clearly you've been noticing something was going on in Brazil.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Fernando, for having me. Yes, this film is a continuation of The Edge of Democracy. Apocalypse in the Tropics began while I was shooting The Edge of Democracy, when I went in the middle of the impeachment process, where Brazil was thrown in a democratic crisis in 2016, as many other countries around the world. And I went to Congress trying to understand what was happening to our democracy. And instead of finding congressmen debating the issues at hand, I found a pastor who evangelized me in the middle of the Congress and asked me to accept Jesus. So that was a very symbolic moment for me, and it opened a rabbit hole in which I decided to enter.
And that pastor, one of the main characters in the film is Silas Malafaia, of course. It's such an interesting character because you had incredible access to President Lula, to former President Jair Bolsonaro. But in many ways, Silas Malafaia was the more interesting one, if I may say, of the power that he had, right? It's incredible.
Yes, Silas Malafaia is one of the most famous Brazilian televangelists, and he anointed, in some ways, Bolsonaro as the leader that would represent evangelicals in the 2018 presidential race. We approached him in 2020. He granted us access, and what was fascinating to see is that we were filming firsthand as his power grew. He was just one ally of Bolsonaro, and he became one of the most important allies and was actually writing the president's speeches, as the film reveals.
And one of the scenes, for example, with Malafaia is a very simple scene, but when he's driving his car and then there was a motorcyclist, I don't know, there was something going on in the traffic, and the way he was swearing to the man and kind of relating to religion almost immediately as well. You can see a lot about the man in just that scene, right?
Yes, and I think that scene also reveals the theology behind this growing evangelical fundamentalist movement in Brazil, which is a theology that comes from the United States, very linked to dominion theology, which many don't know, but this dominion theology is driving global politics in a very strong way, and it says that Christians should take over political power, the three branches of power, the executive, the judiciary, and the legislative, as well as other areas of leadership in society, and ultimately build a theocracy.
Absolutely. And this film, of course, as a Brazilian, I'm very interested in the film. I get to know the characters. But even if you're American, I think there's quite an interesting comparison with the United States as well. It's a story about Brazil, but it can kind of replicate to other countries today as well.
Yes. What I'm tried to do in both my films about politics, because before I was doing very personal films, is to tell the story of Brazil as a fable of what is happening in the crisis of democracy globally. Brazil is a mirror to the rest of the world because these phenomena are spreading like a pandemic, and they're very similar. The rise of this fundamentalist religiosity, which expresses in Brazil and in the United States through Christianity, but in India in another way, in Russia in another way, in Poland in another way. Ultimately, the existential threat that the separation of church and state is suffering right now is a global phenomenon. And if we don't find ways to protect that separation, we're going to go back into centuries of holy war.
I agree, and I could relate to you because you are not perhaps the most expert in the world of evangelicals, right? And I have to say, me neither. So I think there is this problem today, especially in Brazil, that perhaps a sector of society doesn't have a dialogue with that community in a way, and that could make things a bit worse. So it's quite interesting that someone like you took an interest on the topic, right?
Yes, and what we saw was that also during the pandemic, which is when we began filming, the evangelical leaders on the ground in the favelas were the one giving spiritual support, emotional support, and actually doing many things that was the responsibility of the state, like having ambulances go to people's houses. But this is also part of a larger phenomenon where the progressive movements have many of them subsumed to being in social media and have their activism in social media. And who's doing the grassroots work? Who's doing the work of being emotional and spiritual support for people? Many evangelical leaders that are spread throughout the country. And you see that also in Malafaia. Malafaia is a spiritual and professional coach, this pastor that we followed. And what he says to his congregations are things like, you are going to be the generation that will change the world. Who else is saying that to young people today? And so the film Lula says the mistake of socialism was abandoning religion. And I think that's part of a larger coming to terms with the fact that progressive forces have indeed abandoned religion, and with that have lost a huge part of the working class population.
O que levou o socialismo ao fracasso foi a negação da religião.
That was director Petra Costa in conversation with Monocle's Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Her documentary Apocalypse in the Tropics is out now on Netflix, and you can listen to the full conversation on the Monocle Weekly. This is The Globalist.
With UBS, you have a truly global partner, incorporating new technologies, innovative approaches, and unexpected opportunities, leading you to insights that help answer the questions that matter. Delivered with passion, care, and unmatched expertise. Because it's about rising with the dawn each day, knowing that we can do even better. That's what banking is to us. Not just work, but a craft. UBS. Banking is our craft.
.46 here in London, quite early to talk about drink, but that's not stopped us. Alice Lascelles is the Financial Times' contributing editor and joins me now to talk about drinks. A very good morning to you, Alice. Welcome to Monocle Radio.
Good morning. Never too early to talk about drinks.
Never too early. Possibly a little early to open a bottle. But then again, if you're listening at a podcast, I don't know when you're listening. So I don't know what your circumstances are. But Alice and I are going to try and help you, guide us through the world of drink. You wanted to talk about Oregon and this very sad story about wildfires, which actually is influencing the taste.
That's right. Well, I mean, climate change is a big, big topic in wine at the moment, but this was a slightly more unusual way into it. So, you know, the wine growers are facing droughts, floods, and increasing wildfires. In Oregon, there was a particularly big wildfire in 2020. And there's an interesting piece in Slate at the moment about winemakers that are now leaning into the problem of smoke taint. So you ended up with the grapes tasting of smoke, and some winemakers are actually trying to make a virtue of this in their winemaking now, which is something I hadn't heard of until yesterday.
And indeed, when it means influence, just talk us through that influence and what it's making, what changes they're having to make.
Obviously, the smoke clings to the outside of the grape in the same way as it would to your hair, if you were sitting by a bonfire. Some of them are making wine by pressing the grapes and just using the juice rather than the skin. So you're getting a much subtler smoke impact. That's the most successful method so far. I mean, I think, having not tasted them myself, I can't tell you how they come across, but the journalist who wrote this piece suggested that it was actually surprisingly subtle. And I mean, we're seeing, a big trend for smoky flavors in general in drinks and food, whether it's sort of mezcal or smoked meats or whatever. So, smoky wines could be about to have their moment.
Nature always wins, doesn't it? Because if you go to, I don't know, anywhere near a place that's had a volcano, if you go to sort of Sicily or if you go to the Bay of Naples, the wine that you drink will have a very different flavour to it because of what has happened to the earth when a volcano has erupted. We sort of underestimate this, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's terroir in its truest sense, isn't it? I mean, another spin on the smoky story is this, and climate change is the whole, and the environment is the whole debate now about whether Scotch whisky, peated whisky, can be environmentally friendly, because obviously you need to destroy peat bogs, which are really important carbon sinks, to make smoky whisky. And you're seeing now craft whisky producers around the world introducing other forms of smoke into their whisky, often inspired by their local cuisines. So you've got whisky makers in Finland using nettles to smoke their whisky. In Iceland, I've tasted one from Iceland that's smoked with sheep dung. We've got mesquite wood smoked whiskies from Arizona. So this whole idea of what smoke should taste like is also being interrogated and, explored in really interesting ways now in whiskey too.
Let's talk about the United Kingdom, which is still, it fights so hard to get its reputation established when it comes to wine, doesn't it? And one feels as if it's really very, very much on its way. But there's been an alliance that's been created between a Burgundy winemaker and a British winemaker, which for anybody who likes Burgundy wines is thinking, great, new ideas, new tastes.
Yeah, so the story about English wine so far has been mostly about sparkling wine and, champagne, traditional method style sparkling wines. But the really exciting new frontier now that's coming through is still wine. And the real epicenter for this in the UK is Essex, in the southeast of England, and there are a few names that are doing it really well. One of those is Danbury Ridge, that I have visited, and they've got wonderful sort of clay soils and climatic conditions that really suit making still wines, Burgundy style still wines, so Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And they have just announced a new alliance with one of the real rising stars of Burgundy, Domaine Durocher. The fifth generation young winemaker there has teamed up with Danbury Ridge, and they're working on a Pinot Noir that's going to be launched in 2028. And this is causing a lot of excitement because I suppose there's been lots of rumours about people from Burgundy coming over to Essex and checking it out because, Essex is perhaps how Burgundy was 20, 30 years ago, when it was a little bit cooler in Burgundy. There have been all these rumours, and this is the first time it's been confirmed that a high-profile Burgundy winemaker is going to be actually making wine from Essex.
Finally, a very quick point on Gen Z. The accusations fly that life is nothing but oat milk matcha lattes, but not. They're hitting the bottle.
Yeah, well, there's new data out from the IWSR, one of the big analysts of the industry, showing that perhaps they're not as abstinent as we might have thought. A lot of it is actually, we're now seeing an increase for the first time in several years in their drinking again. What's different is that their patterns of drinking are different. So they're more likely to abstain on a regular basis. They drink more widely than previous generations. So they're not just exclusively whiskey drinkers or wine drinkers. They'll drink across the board, different styles. And they also drink on different occasions and different places. So they're just a very different type of consumer to drinkers in previous generations. But it's just an obsession for the drinks world at the moment is what are Gen Z drinking and where are they and how are they drinking?
Alice Lascelles, thank you so much for joining us on the line. You're listening to The Globalist. We're live on Monocle Radio. Finally, on today's programme, North Korea is mixing its soft and hard power with considerable energy at the moment. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov enjoyed a meeting with Kim Jong-un on his yacht this weekend. There was also the opening of North Korea's Wonsan Water Park Resort. Well, Pyongyang wants to show the world that it too is a place that some of us could visit. And now it's secured UNESCO World Heritage status for Mount Kumgang, a mountain range praised by UNESCO as a long-celebrated place of exceptional natural beauty. Well, John Everard is a former British diplomat, formerly the British ambassador to Belarus, to Uruguay and to North Korea. And he joins us on the line now from Norfolk. Good morning, John.
Good morning, and we seem to have a worse connection from Norfolk than I usually get from Kumgang-san.
It's absolutely bananas. OK, we've got 2.5 minutes to talk about this UNESCO World Heritage Site being afforded to Mount Kumgang.
Yes, that's right. How strange. I mean, Kumgang-san is beautiful, soaring mountains, interesting name for all the peaks and so on. But you do get the sense that the fact that Kumgang-san was put forward as a heritage site just at the same time as the South Koreans put forward the Ulsan petroglyphs, which everybody agrees are very significant, might be just a political fix.
And when you mean a political fix, is this in what context? The fact that they need to use and boost tourism to try to the soft power messages it needs to get through.
No, I mean a political fix on behalf of UNESCO, that they didn't want something from one of the two Korean states to go forward without something from the others. So they felt they had to give North Korea something and a heritage site. Its claims are, frankly, just a little bit weak. I mean, it's a beautiful mountain range, but how many other beautiful mountain ranges in the Alps or the Rockies or wherever haven't got heritage status? And the fact that in the nomination they've carved out various parts of Kumgang-san, which are in fact the parts where you get all the strange political messages carved into the rocks, suggests that this wasn't, shall we say, a straightforward decision.
There is an increase in tourism drive from North Korea at the moment, but also this is the third North Korean location to be granted World Heritage status? That's right.
Apart from the intangible heritage, there's all the settlements around Kaesong, the ancient city, and the Koryo tombs, the tombs of the ancient Koryo kings. So, as you say, the third. Increase in tourism. Just a few weeks ago, they opened a huge resort near Wonsan. So yes, they're building up. But the big question is, who's going to go? Are you going to spend your summer holidays in North Korea?
Yes. No, I'm not.
Oh, you're not. Okay.
No,
Caught you out there.
But it looks like some Russians are, because we've seen them on water slides.
Yes, some Russians are, and come back complaining that they are faced with all kinds of rules and regulations. And if you're Russian, you can see Russians going once just for the novelty value. Let's have holiday in North Korea. But it is nearly twice as expensive as a beach holiday as, for example, Turkey or some of the Chinese resorts. And I don't see many Russian families making it their regular summer venue.
John Everard, former British diplomat, formerly the British ambassador to Belarus, to Uruguay and to North Korea. Thank you so much for joining us on the line from Norfolk. And that's all the time we have for today's programme. The warmest of thanks to all my guests and to the producers, Chris Chermak, Tom Webb and Hassan Anderson. Our researcher was Henry King and our studio manager was Lily Austin. After the headlines, there's more music on the way. The briefing's live at midday here in London. The Globalist is back at the same time tomorrow. But for now, from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thank you very much for listening.